All right, let's dive into the Golden Age of Satan. More specifically, its connection to Kabbalah. We'll be looking at Iniciación a la Kabbalah today.
Great source.
Yeah, and it gives us a really good background on Kabbalah in general. But we're going to be focusing mostly on Chapter 4, which zeroes in on this particular period in Satan. So think 16th century. A wave of Jewish mysticism, Kabbalistic thought, just kind of washing over this town. And it became a haven for Jews after the expulsion from Spain in 1492. What's fascinating to me is how this historical upheaval, I mean, you can almost call it a trauma, could spark such a spiritual revolution.
Yeah, and it's a fascinating dynamic. 1492, like you said, this trauma of expulsion from Spain, and so many Jews find refuge in Satan. And it wasn't just like a geographical shift, It created the conditions for a spiritual revival.
Yeah, the book really highlights how many of these Spanish Jews that came to Safed brought with them this deep understanding of Kabbalah. So Safed becomes this hub, this center, this place unlike any other before. It really makes you wonder about the role of hardship in pushing people to seek meaning.
Deeper meaning.
Absolutely. The influx of these Spanish Jews really set the stage. I mean, they knew their stuff. So Safed wasn't just any town. It became the place to delve into Kabbalah. And what's so interesting is that before this period, the Zohar, a really core Kabbalistic text, it was considered too complex for a widespread study. Like people just thought, oh, it's too difficult. But in Safed, it becomes a focal point. And all these intricate ideas that are in it really start to reshape how people understood their faith, the universe.
It's pretty amazing to think about, right? Like you have this text that's considered too difficult and then suddenly, boom, it becomes central to a whole community. There's spiritual exploration. Yeah, and that's the magic of Safed in this period. It was like this incredible melting pot of scholars and mystics, all intensely engaged. And it gave rise to some really extraordinary figures like Rabbi Isaac Luria, who revolutionized Kabbalah with his interpretations.
Yeah, Rabbi Isaac Luria, the Ari.
Exactly.
And his concept of Tzimtzum, this idea of God contracting to make space for creation. Mind-boggling, to say the least. And the book explains it as this cosmic act of giving, this balance between receiving and sharing. It actually makes me think of modern physics, the Big Bang Theory, this explosion from a single point expanding outwards. Do you see any parallels there?
Absolutely. It's just incredible how these ancient Kabbalistic ideas can connect with these modern scientific concepts. I mean, Arya wasn't just a scholar, he was a mystic. He had these profound visions that influenced how we understood, how he understood the cosmos. And he used these very powerful images of light and vessels to explain Tzimtzum. So imagine the infinite light of God creating this void to allow something else to exist. And the vessels are what we use to receive this light.
So that's a really powerful image. So our actions, how we live our lives, it directly affects our ability to hold this light.
Yeah, that's the beauty of Kabbalah. It's not just abstract concepts. It relates to how we live our lives. I mean, the Ari's teachings, they took these complex ideas and made them really personal and even actionable.
But the Ari wasn't the only star in Safed at this time, right?
No, definitely not. We can't forget Rabbi Moshe Cordovero, who's known for his very systematic approach to Kabbalah, which is a stark contrast to Luria's mystical leanings.
Right.
He wrote a major work called Pardes Ramonim, which means Orchard of Pomegranates. And it's like this encyclopedia of Kabbalistic thought, very meticulously organized. Explain.
So you have these two brilliant minds, the Ari with his visions and Cordovero with his systemization. Did they ever interact? Was there a rivalry or a competition?
That's a great question. And it really speaks to the intellectual atmosphere of Safing. Imagine all these scholars and mystics and artists all gathered in this small town debating their ideas. It wasn't just about individuals, it was a collective effort. They were trying to understand these mysteries of the universe and our place in it.
And chapter 4 in the book really paints such a vivid picture of this.
Yeah.
It wasn't all serious study either, right? There's this great anecdote about Rabbi Luria.
Oh, yeah, I know the one you're talking about.
Yes. It perfectly captures, I think, his personality and how he approached his spiritual practice.
Definitely brings him to life.
It does.
It reminds us that these weren't just names in a book. They were real people with their own quirks, their own passions, and their own approaches to understanding the divine.
Yeah. It really does. Speaking of bringing things to life, I think we need to spend a little more time on Tzimtzum. Because it's not just some, abstract idea. It has real implications for how we live, how we understand our place in the universe. Yeah, the book touches on it. It's this act of divine giving and this balance between receiving and sharing. But I'll be honest, I'm still trying to fully grasp it.
Well, it is a complex idea. Think about it this way. The Ari taught that creation begins with this radical act of self-limitation, this contraction of the infinite light. And he argued it wasn't that God couldn't fill all of existence. It was that God chose to create a space for something else to exist.
So God's not absent from creation,
Yeah.
but rather chose to create a space for us.
Yeah. It's a profound act of love and generosity. And this empty space isn't actually empty. It's filled with potential, with possibility for us to become partners in creation. And this is where the idea of vessels comes in.
The vessels, you mentioned those earlier. Can you remind me how they fit into this?
Yeah, so think of the vessels as our capacity to receive and contain the divine light. That emanates from the contraction.
Yeah.
Now, these vessels, they're not physical things. They represent our spiritual potential, our ability to reflect kind of the divine qualities in the world.
So how we live our lives, our actions, our choices, these all impact our ability to be vessels for this light.
Precisely. And here's where it gets interesting. The Ari taught that these vessels, these containers for the divine light, they were initially too fragile to handle the full intensity of God's emanation, and so they shattered.
Wow. That's the shattering of the vessels, right? Did we hear of it?
Exactly. It sounds catastrophic, but it's actually a crucial part of the story. Because when the vessels shattered, sparks of divine light were scattered throughout creation.
So these sparks are like hidden fragments of divinity everywhere.
Well, exactly. And that's where we come in, the concept of tikkun olam, repairing the world. It's not just about fixing social problems, right? It's also about gathering and elevating these sparks, these fragments of divine light, and helping them return to their source.
Wow. That adds a whole new dimension to tikkun olam. It's like we're on a cosmic treasure hunt.
I love that analogy.
Looking for these hidden sparks and helping them find their way home.
Yeah. It's a beautiful way to think about it. Every act of kindness, every moment of connection, every time we choose love over fear, we're gathering these sparks and contributing to the repair of the world and ourselves.
So even in the midst of all the chaos, all the brokenness, there's this underlying current of divine light just waiting to be discovered and reintegrated.
Exactly. And that's a really hopeful message, isn't it? It suggests that even in the darkest of times, even when it feels like everything is falling apart, there's this potential for healing and wholeness.
That potential lies within each of us. I mean, we have this power to make a difference, to contribute to this process of repair.
Absolutely. And it all starts with awareness. Becoming aware of our own capacity to be vessels, to gather those sparks, to choose actions that bring more light into the world.
Speaking of awareness, the book mentions another concept, the Sephirah. Can you shed some light on what those are and how they relate to all of this?
Yeah. The Sephiros are a central part of Kabbalah, and they can be a little tricky to grasp at first. But they're really insightful once you start to understand them. Think of them as 10 emanations, 10 expressions of the divine, each representing a different quality or attribute.
10 expressions of the divine. That's a lot to take in.
It is. And they're often depicted in this tree-like structure, the tree of life. It's not a literal tree, of course, but it's a visual representation of how these divine emanations flow from the infinite into the finite world.
Okay, so each Sephirah on the tree of life is like a different facet of God, a different way the divine manifests in the world.
Exactly. And these Sephirah, they're all interconnected. They relate to each other in these complex ways, and they represent the full spectrum of divine qualities, from wisdom and understanding to love and compassion to strength and beauty.
So how does this tree of life relate to us, to our individual lives?
That's where it gets really fascinating. Kabbalah teaches that we each have our own internal tree of life, like a unique configuration of these sephiros within us. It's like our own personal map of the divine.
Our own personal map of the divine. I like that. So by understanding the sephirah, we can gain a deeper understanding of ourselves, our strengths, our weaknesses, our potential.
Exactly. It's a powerful tool for self-awareness and spiritual growth. By studying the Sephirah, we can learn about the different qualities that we embody, and we can work to cultivate and balance those qualities within ourselves.
So the tree of life isn't just an abstract symbol. It's a living reality. It's a blueprint for our own spiritual development.
Precisely. And it's constantly evolving, just like we are. As we grow and change, so too does our internal tree of life.
That's amazing. I'm already starting to see how these seemingly abstract concepts from Kabbalah can have such a profound impact on our lives. It's not just about intellectual understanding, it's about personal transformation. about aligning ourselves with this divine flow.
That's the beauty of Kabbalah. It's, a spiritual practice, a way of life. It's about taking these ancient teachings and making them relevant to our own experiences, our own journeys.
And speaking of journeys, I'm curious to hear more about Rabbi Moshe Cordovero and how his approach to Kabbalah differed from the Ari's.
Well, unlike the Ari, who was known for his mystical experiences and his focus on the transformations of the divine light, Cordovero was a master of systematization.
So he was more focused on organizing and explaining the existing knowledge of Kabbalah.
Exactly. His major work, Pardes Ramonim, which means Orchard of Pomegranates, it's a testament to this systematic approach. It's a very comprehensive, meticulously structured presentation of Kabbalistic thought.
It sounds like he was trying to make Kabbalah more accessible, to create a roadmap for understanding all its complexities.
Absolutely. And while his approach might seem less mystical than Luria's, it's no less profound. Cordovero's writings are filled with, intellectual rigor and philosophical depth. He delves into the intricacies of the Sephiro, explores the nature of the soul, and offers these really profound insights into the relationship between the divine and the human.
I'm starting to see how these two seemingly contrasting approaches, Luria's visions and Cordovero's systemization, actually complement each other. Like they offer different lenses for understanding the same truths.
Yeah, that's a wonderful insight. It's like they each hold a piece of the puzzle, and together they offer a more complete picture of the Kabbalistic worldview. And it's this diversity of thought that made the Golden Age of Faith so dynamic and influential.
It wasn't just about one way of seeing things. It was about embracing different perspectives, engaging in debate and pushing the boundaries of understanding.
Exactly. And I think that's a valuable lesson for us today as well, to be open to different ways of seeing the world, to engage in respectful dialogue, and to remember that the pursuit of truth is a journey. It's not a destination.
That's a beautiful thought. It reminds us that we don't have to have all the answers.
Yeah.
That it's okay to be curious, to question, to keep exploring.
Absolutely. And in that spirit of exploration, let's talk about something that really captivated me in Chapter 4, this connection between exile and the emergence of Kabbalah as this driving force in Safed.
Yeah, you're right. We can't forget the historical context here. These weren't just abstract ideas floating around. This was a community that had experienced profound trauma and upheaval.
Exactly. The expulsion from Spain, it was devastating. It shattered lives, communities, a whole way of life, and it forced people to grapple with these fundamental questions about their faith, their identity, their place in the world.
And in that search for meaning and that yearning for connection, Kabbalah offered this really powerful framework for understanding their experience.
Precisely. Kabbalah provided a language to articulate their pain, their longing for redemption, their hope for a better future. It offered a way to connect their personal struggles to this larger cosmic narrative.
Yeah. It's like Kabbalah gave them a way to make sense of the chaos, to find meaning in the midst of suffering.
Exactly. And it's remarkable how this spiritual tradition, born out of exile and hardship, it continues to resonate with people today.
That's what's so fascinating about the Golden Age of Safed. It's not just a historical event. It's a story that continues to unfold. It's a wellspring of wisdom that we can draw from as we navigate our own journeys.
Absolutely. And as we move forward, I think it's important to remember that the Golden Age of Safe wasn't just about the teachings themselves. It was about the community, the vibrant intellectual and spiritual atmosphere that allowed these ideas to flourish.
It was about collaboration, dialogue, a shared commitment to exploring the mysteries of the universe and our place in it.
Exactly. And I think that's a really valuable reminder for us today, to seek out communities where we can learn and grow together, to engage in meaningful conversations, and to support each other on our individual and collective journeys of spiritual exploration.
That's a beautiful sentiment. It reminds us that we're not alone in this journey. We have each other, and we have this rich tradition of wisdom to guide us.
And speaking of guidance, there's another aspect of the Ari's teachings that I think is particularly relevant to our conversation about exile and the search for meaning. It's the idea of Gilgul, or reincarnation.
Reincarnation. How does that fit into the picture?
So the Ari taught that souls can reincarnate multiple times, returning to this world to learn, to grow, and ultimately achieve their spiritual purpose.
So it's not a one and done kind of deal.
No.
We have multiple opportunities to get it right.
Exactly. And this idea, reincarnation, offered a really powerful message of hope for a community grappling with, with the trauma of exile.
It's like saying, even if we didn't achieve everything in this lifetime, there's always another chance. We're not defined by our failures or setbacks. There's always an opportunity for growth and redemption.
That's beautifully said. And I think that's a really empowering message for us today as well. We all make mistakes. We all experience setbacks. But the Ari's teachings remind us that we're not stuck in those moments. We have the power to learn from our experiences, to grow, to continue evolving.
It's like life is a spiral, not a straight line. We might revisit similar themes or challenges in different lifetimes, but each time we have the opportunity to approach them with greater wisdom and understanding.
That's a wonderful way to think about it. And it reminds us that there's no rush, no need to get it perfect in this lifetime, The journey is the destination.
Speaking of journeys, I'm curious to explore another aspect of Kabbalah that was really prominent during this period, the role of Kavanah, or intention, in spiritual practice.
Kavanah. It's such a crucial element, and yet it's often overlooked. The Kabbalists of Safed, they emphasize that our actions aren't enough. It's the intention behind those actions that truly matters.
So it's not just about doing the right things, but doing them with the right mindset, the right heart.
Exactly. Imagine you're giving charity. You could give a large sum of money, but if you're doing it out of a sense of obligation or to impress others, the spiritual impact is minimal.
But if you give even a small amount with a genuine desire to help, with a heart filled with compassion, then the impact is amplified.
Precisely. Kavanah is about aligning our actions with our hearts, about infusing every aspect of our lives with this conscious intention. And this applies to everything we do, from the simplest acts to the most complex endeavors.
So even mundane tasks like, washing dishes or going for a walk can become spiritual practices if we approach them with the right intention.
Absolutely. It's about bringing awareness to every moment, about recognizing the interconnectedness of all things, and about choosing to act in ways that are aligned with our highest values.
It sounds like Kavanah is a really powerful tool for transforming our everyday lives into a spiritual practice.
Exactly. It's about cultivating mindfulness, paying attention to our thoughts, our emotions, our motivations. And it's about making choices that align with our desire to connect with the divine, to bring more light into the world, and to contribute to the healing of ourselves and others.
That's a beautiful reminder. It suggests that we don't need to, live these extraordinary lives to experience the transformative power of Kabbalah. It's about bringing awareness and intention to the ordinary moments, the everyday choices that we make.
And it's in those moments, in those seemingly mundane choices, that we discover the extraordinary beauty and potential that lies within each of us.
I love that. And speaking of potential, the Golden Age of Sefer wasn't just about individual thinkers and their ideas. It was also about this collective energy, this creative ferment that permeated the entire community.
You're absolutely right. The Kabbalists of Safed didn't exist in a vacuum. They were part of a vibrant intellectual and artistic scene that fueled their explorations and inspired their creativity.
Like the whole town was buzzing with ideas and inspiration.
Exactly. And this creative energy wasn't limited to just Kabbalistic study. It found expression in art, music, poetry, and even architecture. The synagogues built during this period, for example, are known for their unique beauty and symbolism.
It's like the Kabbalistic teachings with their emphasis on emanation, on the flow of divine energy into the world. It ignited a creative spark in the entire community.
It's a beautiful image. It reminds us that spirituality isn't just about intellectual pursuits or solitary practices. It's about connection, about community, about celebrating the beauty and diversity of human expression.
And about recognizing the divine spark that resides within each of us, waiting to be ignited and shared with the world.
Absolutely. And I think that's a wonderful note to end on.
It is inspiring to see how a community's facing such, really hardship could channel their experiences into something so profound, so spiritual, so creative. But I'm curious, as we wrap up, our dives into this golden age of Safed, what surprised you the most? What will you continue to ponder?
I think what really struck me is how the Kabbalists of Safed didn't shy away from the complexity of their situation. They didn't try to ignore it. They embraced it, wrestled with it, and ultimately they found a way to transform it into something meaningful, purposeful.
Yeah, it makes you think. They could have so easily given in to despair, hopelessness, but they chose to dive deeper into their faith, into these mystical teachings.
Yeah.
They offered a different lens to see the world and their place in it.
Yeah, and it's a reminder for us today, even in the darkest of times, even when faced with these huge challenges, there's always a possibility of finding meaning, of connecting to something greater and contributing to the healing of the world.
Which brings us back to that concept of tikkun olam, right? It's not just a passive thing. It's a call to action. It's an invitation to participate in this ongoing process of repair,
Yeah.
transformation.
Exactly. It's about recognizing we're not just bystanders. We each have a role to play, and it starts with our own personal transformation, with our own commitment to gathering those sparks,
Yeah.
and letting them shine through our actions.
Those sparks, it makes me think of, we were talking about the Sephiro earlier,
Yeah.
the 10 emanations. How do they connect to tikkun olam?
Well, each sefer, it represents a different quality of the divine, and they each have a role in Tikkun Olam. For example, Chizd, which represents loving kindness.
Right.
It's crucial for repairing the world because it's through these acts of compassion, these acts of generosity that we gather and elevate those sparks.
So it's not just about the intellectual understanding
Mm-hmm.
or mystical insights. It's about, embodying these divine qualities in our lives.
Yeah.
And how we interact with each other and with the world around us.
Yeah, exactly. Tikkun Olam is a lived experience. It's a way of being in the world, aligning our actions with our hearts, making choices that reflect our values.
Yeah.
And contributing to the creation of, a more just world, a more compassionate world, a more harmonious world.
It's a beautiful vision.
Yeah,
And it's something we can all kind of aspire to.
I agree. It's a universal call to action. It's an invitation to step into our full potential as human beings and to co-create a world that reflects the beauty and the wisdom and the love that lies at the heart of creation.
What a perfect note to end on. Our journey through the golden age of SAFT has been, incredibly insightful, inspiring, and I have to admit, a bit humbling. It's reminded me that even when facing challenges, immense challenges, there's always hope, always a possibility of transformation, and always an opportunity to connect to something greater than ourselves.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And may your own exploration of these Kabbalistic ideas, may it continue to unfold, leading you to deeper insights and a more profound experience of the divine spark that's within us all.
Until next time, keep diving deep.